Imagine a country devastated by decades of gang violence and drug trafficking, now led by a bold young leader, Nayib Bukele, who promises to transform this nation into a place of peace and security. What many don't know is that this transformation goes beyond political and security strategies. Behind Bukele's policies, there's an invisible spiritual battle shaping the destiny of El Salvador. Let's dive into this spiritual dimension and discover how it influences the reality of this country. If you're curious to understand how the spiritual can affect the political and social, sign up now and follow along to the end. Nayib Bukele, president of El Salvador, has emerged as a global figure for his relentless approach against drug trafficking and gang violence. His policies have been tough but effective, bringing a renewed sense of security to many citizens. Besides his tangible measures, Bukele understands that the fight against crime goes beyond physical and political measures, also encompassing a spiritual dimension. In El Salvador, a deeply religious country, spirituality plays a crucial role in everyday life and politics. Bukele recognizes that many gangs operate under the influence of evil spiritual forces, a view that shapes his approach to governance. It's not just about creating laws or imposing order, but incorporating divine principles that can guide a nation toward justice and peace. In biblical history, we see how kings and prophets turned to God in times of crisis, seeking wisdom and direction to lead the people with integrity and justice. Similarly, modern leaders are challenged to seek God's face in their decisions. Incorporating spiritual principles into policies doesn't just mean promoting moral values, but also recognizing God's presence and power in every decision made. It means defending truth, justice, and human dignity, knowing that every soul is precious in the eyes of the Lord. Maria, a single mother from San Salvador, saw her life transformed when Bukele's policies began to take effect. Maria, before I was afraid to go out at night, she says. Now I feel I can walk the streets without fear. Her story is just one among thousands who have experienced the change. Bullets cut through the air while fervent prayers in the churches echoed through the streets, each shot and each prayer representing a larger battle between light and darkness. The spiritual battle in El Salvador is like an approaching storm, with dark clouds swirling and threatening thunder. Each prayer is a ray of light piercing the darkness, each governmental action a wave facing the fury of the dark sea. As we understand how spirituality influences political decisions, we must now turn our eyes to the prophet, the one endowed with divine discernment and wisdom, observing and analyzing the situation in El Salvador through a spiritual lens. Our prophet is a religious leader deeply rooted in faith and intimacy with God. He doesn't just see what's on the surface, but discerns the invisible movements of the spiritual world that influence the course of human events. This leader, guided by the Holy Spirit, understands that every political decision, every governmental action is imbued with a larger spiritual battle. He constantly prays, seeking divine direction and interceding for his people and their leaders. Understanding that the spiritual war precedes and influences the physical war, we can now explore how these spiritual forces directly impact human actions. Nayib Bukele recognizes that many gangs and cartels terrorizing El Salvador don't operate merely for greed or earthly power, but are under the influence of evil spiritual forces. These forces drive men to commit atrocities, spread fear, and destruction. When an individual surrenders to such influences, they become an instrument of darkness, perpetuating violence and corruption. We must now face the grim reports of sacrifices and satanic rituals that permeate our modern society. These rituals are not just manifestations of evil, but clear signs of an ongoing spiritual battle. In El Salvador, gangs performing human sacrifices, like the testimony of the former member horrified to see a baby being offered, are disturbing examples of how deeply evil can root itself in a community. As we understand the depth of this spiritual battle, we realize that the community's response is crucial. In El Salvador, the spiritual community doesn't remain inert in the face of spiritual challenges and Bukele's firm policies. They rise as one body, armed with faith and prayer, ready to face the darkness threatening their nation. Churches, with their doors open, become true bastions of hope and renewal. Pastors and spiritual leaders call for prayer vigils, moments of fasting and intercession services, crying out to God for protection and wisdom. They recognize that the country's transformation will not come solely from the government's hands, but through divine intervention. Witnessing the vibrant and determined spiritual response of the community in El Salvador, it is imperative to reflect on the essential role of faith and prayer in social transformation. Faith, my beloved, is the driving force that sustains us in storms and guides us through darkness. And prayer is the channel through which we connect with the Almighty, seeking His intervention and guidance. In El Salvador, faith manifests as an anchor, keeping the people firm and unwavering in the face of adversity. It is faith that fuels hope, motivates action, and instills courage in weary hearts. When the faithful gather in prayer, they are calling upon divine power to intervene in their lives and their nation. Recognizing the profound influence of faith and prayer in social transformation, we are led to reflect on the spiritual journey we have traveled together. In El Salvador, the spiritual battle is not an abstract concept, but a reality, lived daily by a people who cling to faith amidst adversity. In this context, we see how Nayib Bukele, with his spiritual sensitivity, leads his security policies with a vision that goes beyond mere physical combat against crime. He understands that to dismantle the structures of evil, a movement of spiritual renewal is needed, starting in people's hearts and spreading throughout the nation. His leadership demonstrates that effective policies are those that recognize the interconnectedness of the spiritual and physical worlds. The prophet, in his observation, sees a people who, guided by a leader sensitive to spiritual realities, respond with renewed faith and unwavering determination. The spiritual community of El Salvador rises in unity, their prayers and actions reflecting a deep conviction that God is capable of transforming the nation. The importance of faith and prayer is evident. They are not just spiritual tools, but transformative forces that have the power to change societies. Prayer unites people, strengthens their souls, and instills courage to face daily battles. Faith, in turn, sustains the hope that a better future is possible, even in the face of the greatest difficulties. For spiritual leaders and communities, the message is clear. Continue seeking God fervently, promoting justice, and living in a way that your actions reflect the light of Christ. Encourage the practice of communal prayer, for it has the power to change the course of events. Always seek divine guidance in all decisions, knowing that true victory begins in the spiritual realm. May we all learn from the example of El Salvador, where the intersection of spirituality and politics demonstrates that the fight for good is waged both in heaven and on earth. May we be inspired to incorporate these principles into our own lives and communities, trusting that, with faith and prayer, we can face any challenge and achieve the peace and justice we so deeply seek.